Verbs and their usage. Well, as promised, here's the video on verbs and their usage. This is a complicated topic, but it's essential knowledge for anyone wishing to gain IELTS level 4 or above. I would suggest you take your time with this, carefully digesting the information slowly but steadily for the best results. A verb definition. In any sentence, spoken or written, a verb is a word that is used to say something about something else. The word verb comes from the Latin verbum. A verb is sometimes described as being the chief word in a sentence because it denotes the action. A verb can be finite, meaning limited, or infinite, meaning not limited. There are essentially three kinds of verbs: transitive, intransitive, or auxiliary. A finite verb is any part of a verb that can be used for saying something about something else in either a statement, a question, a desire, or an exclamation. A finite verb is so called because it is limited to the same person, grammatically speaking, that is, first, second, or third person, and to the same number, that is, singular or plural, as its nominative. This is distinct from verbs that are not finite, that is, not limited to number or person, and of three different kinds. Infinitive mood, for example, to retire, I wish to retire. A participle, for example, retired in a retired teacher. Or as a gerund, for example, retiring, as in I think of retiring. We often talk about conjugating verbs, and this simply means displaying all forms of a verb in a fixed order. Verbs are initially in two categories, regular and irregular. Regular verbs refers to the conjugation of any verb and means this verb conforms to the same form as the other verbs in this category. For example, the verb to walk is regular because it conforms to the following pattern. The simple present tense, I walk, she, he walks, we walk, you walk, they walk. The simple past tense, I walked, she, he walked, we walked, you walked, they walked. So everything in this simple past tense is the same. Irregular verbs refer to the conjugation of any verb, and it means the verb does not conform to the same form as other verbs. For example, the verb to do is irregular because it differs from all other forms of verb patterns. The simple present, I do, she, he does, we do, you do, they do. But simple past tense, I did, she, he did, we did, you did, they did. Other example is the verb to be. It's irregular because it too differs from all other forms of verb patterns. The simple present, I am, she, he is, we are, you are, they are. Or the simple past tense, I was, she, he were, we were, you were, they were. Transitive and intransitive verbs. Some verbs can be used either transitively or intransitively. Transitive means passing on or passing over, and a verb is used transitively when the action denoted by that verb does not stop with the doer but passes on to something else. That means they can only be used with a direct object. For example, he, subject, shot, verb used transitively, the sheriff, which is the direct object of the verb shot. He shot the sheriff. Sometimes a verb can be used transitively and have more than one object. He shot the sheriff 100 times. So we've got the sheriff is a direct object of the verb shot, and 100 times is also a direct object of the verb shot. Voice. A transitive verb has two voices, active and passive. These words are taken from Latin activus, meaning active, and passivus, meaning suffering. Active voice, the person or thing denoted by the subject, is said to do something to something else. For example, the professor teaches the class. The professor is actively doing something to the class. The passive voice, the person or thing, is said to suffer something from something else. For example, the class is taught by the professor. In this sentence, the class is said to be suffering from the professor, but we hope not. Intransitive. Simply defined, this refers to any verb that does not have a direct object. There are two circumstances where a verb is used intransitively. One, if it has a cognate object, and I'm about to come to that, and two, if it is used in a causal sense. There is a rarely used third circumstance as a reflexive object. For example, fare thee well, or they sat them down. Cognate objects are in 5 different forms. First one, a verb may be defined as being intransitive if it's followed by an implied noun, meaning implied by in the noun, in the verb itself, known as a cognate, a kindred object. For example, he slept a sound sleep. Slept and sleep are related. He lived a long life. Lived and life are related. B, a verb may be defined as intransitive if it's followed by a noun of similar meaning. For example, he fought a hard battle. So when you have a battle, you fight. So fought and battle belong. Number C, a noun that describes the understood but not stated noun. For example, he played the fool, meaning he played the part of a fool. Number D, an adjective is used to qualify the understood cognate noun. For example, she tried her hardest, referring to the trial or the attempt. And E, using the word it to express the cognate noun. We must fight it to the finish. It means the fight. Causal sense. If an intransitive verb is used in a causal sense, it becomes transitive. For example, he speaks hoarsely, meaning he makes himself, which is a direct object, hoarse by speaking. Note that an intransitive verb can be made transitive by adding a preposition to it. However, there are times when the preposition doesn't need to be stated as it's understood. For example, he looked me in the face. We don't state the preposition at, so we could say he looked at me in the face. Auxiliary verbs. An auxiliary verb forms the tense or mood of a principal verb and no longer has its power as a standalone verb as a result. There are only a small number of auxiliary verbs. They form from the following 6 verbs: have, be, shall, will, may, and do. The only 2 tenses that can be conjugated without using an auxiliary verb are the present and the past tenses. All other forms of verbs need the help of these auxiliary verbs. Note that the verbs to have and to be are always followed by participles, whereas the other auxiliary verbs are always followed by infinitives. For example, I have been at school all day. Have relinquishes its power in its actual sense or meaning of ownership to assist the verb been to form a present perfect tense. Objects of a verb. There are several forms of objects. For example, a noun, he lifted the lid, lid being a noun, with my hands. A pronoun, he sat me is a pronoun, down on the chair. An adjective used as a noun, we helped the needy, object again. Infinitive verb, they want to entertain us tomorrow. She enjoyed cooking for a crowd. What did she enjoy? Cooking. A phrase, the family drove, where did they drive? To the shops. A clause, we had no idea who would be coming to lunch. There can also be double objects. For example, one object denotes a thing, that is a direct object, and the other object denotes a person or other animal, that is an indirect object. For example, I taught my students, which is indirect, about English grammar, which is direct. The indirect object is always first. However, if it's placed after the direct object, it must be preceded by the prepositions for or to, or it simply doesn't make sense. I taught English grammar as a direct object to my students as the indirect object. Direct object of a verb refers to the action of that transitive verb and what receives that action, whereas an indirect object refers to the action of an intransitive verb and who receives that action. Note that an intransitive verb never has a direct object. Complements to the verb are also defined as being objects to the verb. These are verbs that have only one object but still need a word or word to make it complete. There are at least 8 forms of complements. A noun form, they made him leader, leader being the complement to the verb made. A noun used in possessive case or a pronoun. She made Sue's problem her own. What did she make her own? Sue's problem. An adjective, that knowledge set the scientist free. What was a scientist? He was set free. A participle, after the crash, the wheels were still spinning. The complement is still spinning. A preposition with an object, the car crash filled us all with terror. With terror is the complement. An infinitive, I would like the cause to be determined. What do you want to be determined? The cause. So to be determined is the complement. An adverb, they discovered the victim injured. So injured is the complement of discovered the victim. A clause, life has made him what he is. The complement of made him is what he is. Some verbs can be used both transitively and intransitively. And here are some examples that change the verb from being transitive, I've noted it with a T, to intransitive, I've noted it with an I. They open, T, the door at 8 in the morning, but the doors open at 8 in the morning. He closed his shop, but the shop closed at the end of the day. Participles, from the Latin word participium, meaning sharing. A participle can be described as being a form of a verb that ascribes to a noun the action of that noun. For example, he is a willing student of English grammar. Participles are also used to make forms of verbs and help denote tense, as in compound verbs. Having said, is going. Gerunds are part of a verb which for an intransitive verb has the function of a noun, but for a transitive verb retains the function of a verb. Can also be followed by an object in the same way as if it is a finite verb. Note that a gerund is often regarded as a participle. ing is often a participle, but it has a noun function, so it is a gerund. He is fond of hunting. Here we go here. He enjoys hunting rabbits as both a noun and a verb function. A gerund used as a noun may be the subject, object, or complement of a verb, or it may be the object to a preposition. Retiring is the aim of all workers. Subject of the verb is. I like sleeping in the sun. Object of the verb like. My dog's constant habit is sleeping. Complement to the verb my dog's constant habit is. She is fond of eating. Object to a preposition, of being the preposition. A gerund as a verb retains its verb properties and therefore may have an object. There are 5 kinds of objects for gerunds as verbs. Direct object with a transitive verb, she's clever at teaching. Indirect object with a transitive verb, she's clever at teaching English grammar to her students. Retained using the passive voice, they are pleased at being taught English grammar. Cognate object with an intransitive verb, he's proud of having fought a good fight. A reflexive object with an intransitive verb, he's in the habit of oversleeping himself. Mood refers to the way an action is spoken of. There are 3 finite moods and 1 infinitive mood. Finite moods, indicative mood, the mood of assertion or inquiry, he comes. Imperative mood is the mood of command or action, come. Subjunctive mood is the mood of supposition, so it follows the word if he comes. Infinitive mood example is to come. Voice. Transitive verbs can have either active or passive voice. An active voice, the person or thing is denoted by the subject, is said to do something to something else. For example, Peter eats the cake. Passive voice or thing is said to suffer something from something else. The cake is eaten by Peter. Intransitive verbs are never in active voice unless the cognate object is in the active voice. For example, teachers fought a hard battle in the media is active voice. But a hard battle was fought by the teachers in the media is passive voice. Person from a grammatical point of view. The number and person of a finite verb depends entirely on the subject. The rule of agreement is that if a finite verb must be in the same number and object as its person, as its subject. That is singular or plural. If the subject is singular, the verb must be singular. Example, the boy is eating. Pardon my typo. If the subject is plural, then the verb must be plural. Thunderclouds are gathering. Person, first, second, or third person. The subject is in the first person. The verb has to be in the first person. I am a teacher. We are all students. If the subject is in the second person, the verb must be in the second person. You come, you are coming. If the subject is in the third person, the verb must be in the third person. The teacher has come. Please continue to watch the next videos where you'll learn more conversational English and extend your knowledge and skills in Australian English, reading, speaking, listening, writing, and understanding. There's also more information in the next few videos, next 20 videos, about the use of verbs, etc. So if you haven't quite got it, just keep watching. And can I ask you, if this content has been helpful, would you please subscribe to this channel? Many thanks, and hope you get to Australia one day.